Today, as part of our discussion on administrative theory, we shall look at the contributions of Herbert Simon. See, Herbert Simon comes at a particular critical juncture. I am saying so not only from the point of view of the historical context in which he has to be placed, but also from the fact that he has got his own contemporary relevance. He has got his own contemporary relevance. That means from both of these respects, Herbert Simon assumes and his contributions assume a lot of significance within the scope of what is called as public administration. This is the first aspect. Second aspect, if I have to elaborate on this historical context as to how Herbert Simon assumes his significance within the study of public administration through his contributions, probably I may have to do so with the support of one sort of stage at which public administration, both as a discipline and as a practice, had been at that particular juncture. Remember, as we have seen in our previous sessions, public administration, with the publication of Woodrow Wilson's article, The Study of Administration in 1887, has got significant push. This push was on the premise of what is called as politics administration dichotomy. Till then, we know that it was felt that administration is a sub-branch of political science as a discipline. Because of this article and also because of the historical context in which this article has been written, because of the growing complexity of the society under the situation of industrial revolution, administration was posed with many challenges and complex problems from the society. And this necessitated to have this aspect of politics as administration dichotomy as propounded by Woodrow Wilson. And this has been taken forward by many thinkers such as Frank J. Goodnow, where it started reaching its peak, and this entire peak was reached when this politics administration dichotomy had been taken to the status of what is called as science of public administration. That means they were saying that public administration is a social science, and as we do what is called as scientific study in natural sciences, public administration can also be subjected to such scientific study through the methodology of observation, hypothesis, and also putting it to empirical study, and then proving the hypothesis such that we arrive at to evolve what is called as theory. So they felt that science of public administration is possible, And this is where we see number of thinkers contributing towards public administration as a discipline in their effort to make it a science. The most important contribution, even though had been from Luther Gulick and Linda Ludwig in this space, it in fact began with the publication of W.F. Willoughby's study on public administration. He wrote what is called as Principles of Public Administration, in which he stated that there are certain fundamental principles in public administration which are analogous to those which characterize the natural sciences. This statement had shook many of the public administration thinkers, and there were a beeline of publications in this particular line of thought. So they started focusing upon what is called as principles. So the science of public administration as an effort has led to the arrival of what is called as principles of public administration. They wanted to make it a pure science. This was the effort which was begun. And in this line, we know the contribution of Henry Foyle, who wrote in 1930 what is called as General Industrial Management, in which he proposes these principles called POCC, the famous acronym. Planning, Organizing, Coordination, Control. Similarly, in spite of so many contributions which have been coming towards the so-called principles of public administration, the most important contribution, as I was pointing out earlier, was from Luther Gulick and Linda Ludwig, who published these papers called Papers on Science of Administration in 1937. In these papers, they have reiterated what Willoughby has stated, where they say that we can arrive at these principles by inductive study of human organizations. Number one, we arrive at these principles by inductive study of human organizations. And number two, they didn't stop there to just conclude that they are analogous to the natural sciences. They said that these are principles which can be applied to any association of humankind. That means they are making these principles universal. Nicholas Henry calls this stage of arriving at these principles of public administration, as has been enunciated by Gulick and Ludwig in this paper called Papers on the Science of Administration, published in 1937, as zenith of public administration. Famously, if you read Mohit Bhattacharya, you find that he uses a particular kind of expression. He says that the public had been, that is, the aspect of public had been completely lost to this quest of arriving at science of public administration based on certain universal principles. Simultaneously, you must not forget the fact that there is an important contribution from Max Weber, the famous sociologist, where he enunciated this theory of bureaucracy. Theory of bureaucracy. He initiated this theory of bureaucracy. On the basis of a particular premise which is called as legal rationality. And another premise that they exercise what is called as domination. Domination by knowledge. By saying so, he provided the basic premise which is required to build any particular organization or the structure of the organization through these what is called as principles which are universal in character, which can be applied to any kind of human association. That might be home, that might be school, that might be hospital, whatever it is. As I said, this is the zenith of public administration, as Nicholas Henry points out. But simultaneously, we also see that these so-called principles of public administration, which has, according to Nicholas Henry, taken public administration as a discipline to a particular zenith in terms of discipline, was subject to lot of challenges and severe criticism. It is this criticism which started a trend of decline in this particular zenith that we were referring to. The criticism and the challenge was so harsh and deep that public administration as a discipline has started seeing this most important challenge of what is called as identity crisis. It has been pushed into such crisis because of these challenges and criticisms. These challenges came in two respects. Number one, few thinkers have said that this so-called politics administration dichotomy is absurd. When Woodrow Wilson proposed this idea of politics administration dichotomy, he was trying to ensure that administration is free from what is called as norms. Political science is a normative science. It's a value-laden discipline. Woodrow Wilson felt that public administration has nothing to do with these values. What they have to do is, they have to be what is called as action part of the government. They have to implement whatever the value-laden decisions or value-laden conclusions or objectives which have been made by the politics. This is where one of the definitions that we see is administration is all about getting things done. But by the time we arrive at this phase of 1937 to 1950, during which we see enormous challenges which have emerged against public administration as a discipline, is a very different context. Whereas this freedom from normative science was at a particular juncture of social context which has emerged because of the widespread impact of industrial revolution. The context now was a Second World War, and the war which was still grappling with aftermath of First World War, and also most importantly, this is the time where the world was reeling under severe pressure of aftermath of Great Depression of 1929. So in this particular context, if I say that administration has to be free from politics, whereby their act is only to just get the implementation aspect of politics, political scientists felt that it was not meeting the popular aspirations. So at this juncture, the entire historical context itself is different. So just focusing upon principles of administration, thinking about the structure had to be discarded is what a proposition which was proposed by these political scientists. F.M. Marx, in his book Elements of Administration, states that this politics administration dichotomy is an assumption. He states that it is an assumption and hence it could not be dichotomized. In the same line of thought, we have another famous political scientist, James Goss. John Goss states that in our times, that is, he is trying to put this entire study of public administration as a discipline. At that particular historical context, in our times, any theory of public administration is a theory of politics also. By stating so, he states that public administration is political science. There is another challenge which also came in another form. So the first form of challenge or criticism was against this political administration dichotomy, which was the basis for creation of this entire science of public administration in its evolution as an independent discipline. So the second challenge was against what has evolved out of this public administration, politics administration dichotomy in the form of what is called as principles of administration. Principles of public administration. Chester Bernard, and before him, the famous Hawthorne experiments, which have proved that this entire notion of principles do not cater to the much required social aspect, particularly focusing on the individual, the interpersonal relationships. Interpersonal relationships are an inescapable aspect of any organization, and these interpersonal relationships would evolve in such a way that there is not only official lines or formal lines of communication, there are also informal lines of communication. Many things happen through these informal lines of communication, as you pointed out. So it received a clear jolt from these human relations theory. Another significant jolt has been received from Chester Bernard through his publication of what is called as Functions of the Executive, published in 1937. Where he said that these so-called principles of administration lack scientific validity. At the same time, we also know that through the publication of MP Follett's creative experience, in spite of such structural analysis and structural prescriptions through principles of administration, they are not free from conflicts. If these principles are true, there should not be any scope for conflict. Yet conflict had been a part and parcel of every organization, as it has been pointed out by MP Follett. And this challenge to the principles of public administration was taken to the next level by none other than Herbert Simon. So whatever the questions which have been raised against this so-called assumption of politics administration dichotomy, hence discarding this entire idea of administration being a discipline of scientific study, had been taken up by Herbert Simon. Let me clearly point out here that Herbert Simon has not only challenged these principles of public administration, but he provided an alternative, saying that scientifically valid administrative theory is possible. And by concluding so, he also made a very important contribution. He replaced this idea of politics administration dichotomy with another novel idea, we know that the premise for such a dichotomy had been the notion that administration's task is to get things done. This has been the premise, action. What Herbert Simon did was, to this action, he adds what is called as premises. So he replaces this politics administration dichotomy with some other idea, a novel idea, whereby this novel idea, which is the premise for the study of entire theoretical presentation that Herbert Simon makes, will replace this politics administration dichotomy. So from these two challenges, Herbert Simon was giving an alternative, a solution. So he was not only a part of what is called as indictment of the principles of public administration, he did provide an alternative. This is the first important contribution of Herbert Simon at this particular historical context. His indictment is very peculiar. He published a paper called Problems of Administration, in which he calls the principles of administration as proverbs. He calls the principles of administration as proverbs. He didn't stop it. Even if they were to be proverbs, there is some utility that these proverbs might have had. But he says that they are not only proverbs that occur because of this entire scientific, so-called scientific study which had been done in order to evolve this science of public administration. These proverbs also occur in mutually contradicting ways. They also occur in mutually contradicting ways. And in this paper called Proverbs of Public Administration, he uses two proverbs. There is a proverb called look before you leap. There is a proverb called look before you leap. There is another contrary proverb. He who hesitates is lost. He who hesitates is lost. So what Simon was trying to point out was, whatever the most of the prepositions, he brings it to the level of prepositions from principles. Most of these prepositions that make up this entire body of so-called administrative theory that we see through this evolution of what is called as principles of public administration by a number of thinkers, share whatever this defect which these proverbs show. That is where we find that for almost every principle that we observe, we can find an equally plausible and acceptable contradictory principle. This understanding of equally plausible and acceptable contradictory principle is very important. Why? When these principles pair up and there is a necessity for application of a particular principle in a particular administrative or organizational situation, he says that this pair of principles will lead to exactly opposite organizational recommendations. If specialization as a principle is equated with this particular proverb called look before you leap, and if unity of command is equated with this particular proverb called he who hesitates is lost, now which is the principle I have to apply? Both of these principles are leading to different or rather exactly opposite organizational recommendations. We have this principle called span of control. What is span of control? As Gilligan says, the number of people who can be commanded. Span of control for them, as we learned earlier, is not about the one who issue commands. It's about the ones who are receptors of these commands. So span of control tells us that if there is a superior, he can control effectively only a limited number of subordinates, and if this particular number exceeds it leads to what? Organizational ineffectiveness, organizational inefficiency. But at the same time, if I have a narrow span of control, then what will happen? Whenever I have narrow span of control, there will be tremendous increase in the hierarchies within the organization. It leads to what? A very tall hierarchical organization. That means whenever we move upwards, if I have to apply this span of control as a principle, there must be minimum number of supervisory levels. However, as I can manage limited number of people, there will be an increase in these supervisory positions. This is how both of these contradict. Let me present this picture, how this contradiction has been shown by Herbert Simon. Take the case of specialization. He says that specialization in any organization leads to an increase in administrative efficiency, as has been pointed out by Luther Gehrig and Lindahl Urwig in their papers. That means the task has to be divided, and this division must lead to more and more specialization. So from the point of view of input and output, more and more specialization would lead to more and more efficiency within the organization. Now take this aspect of unit of command and how this contradicts with specialization. As has been pointed out by Gehrig and Urwig, the command must be a single supervisor. If there is an increase in the number of supervisors and the number of commands increase, there will be confusion and chaos. Simultaneously with the focus on principles of administration, there was one more study which was also happening, which we have discussed earlier: scientific management. F.W. Taylor's scientific management. We know that in this scientific management, he proposes that shop floor management is possible by having scientifically dividing the entire work. So for him, there are certain criteria that we can consider that can be divided on the basis of materials, that can be divided on the basis of man, and that can also be divided on the basis of speed, that can be divided on the basis of machines. Now we have to consider that there is a supervisor who has the supervisory role with regard to materials. There is another supervisor who has his supervisory roles with regard to speed. There is another supervisor who has his supervisory role with regard to machines. Then I have these supervisory roles, I have these shop floor workers, whereby if I am a supervisor as part of material segment, I will issue commands this to this thing. If I am part of supervisory role as part of speed, I will also issue commands to this thing. And if I am part of supervisory role as part of machines, I will also issue commands to this thing. Now you see, when you have at a particular hierarchy so many commands, and if I take into consideration the entire organizational situation and the entire hierarchies which are possible in the large organizations, these commands would increase in number of times. It is pure confusion, and at times it may also rise to chaotic situations. It leads to what? Inefficiency and ineffectiveness in the organization. So this is where Gulick and Herbert say that there has to be unity of command. So what Gulick and Herbert proposes was, if there is unity of command, then it leads to organizational efficiency. Until this, it is fine. So this is what Gulick and Herbert have focused on. What Simon says is, this entire aspect of unity of command is dysfunctional. Why? Let me assume that he belongs to education department and that too accounting section. Now there has to be a command which has to be issued by the finance section. As we have to follow this unity of command principle, finance section cannot issue their commands to these workers. So what they have to do? They have to approach their supervisor in the accounting section. There are a number of such departments within the organization. This is one aspect of it. Another aspect is, suppose this worker has a particular doubt in the finance department. As we know that unity of command is all about those who are commanded. If I get a particular doubt in the finance department, I have to approach my supervisor, and the supervisor has to go to the finance department to get the information. So what Simon says is, Simon says that Gulick and Herbert have failed to focus upon this particular aspect. So this had been the focus of Simon. So this is where we say there might be a number of advisory roles. There might be a number of influences, there might be a number of requirements, there might be a number of preferences. These influences which occur upon the organization at the top of this particular supervisor have not been observed by Gulick and Herbert. Now, is it unity of command? Will it lead to specialization? So if I think that he is specialized, then he cannot or he need not seek information from the finance department. He should be in a position to give that information. At the same time, he need not seek information, he need not seek any advisory thing from any other department. So the specialization becomes notional, unity of command also becomes notional. Both are now conflicting. In the same situation where I have to apply unity of command, it is becoming impossible. And because of the unity of command, specialization is also getting hard. You see how both of these are occurring in pair, that too mutually contradicting. This was the severe indictment of Herbert Simon against the principles of public administration. He says that these have remained mere proverbs, and these have remained mutually contradicting, and hence they are just myths. He not only brought in an identity crisis for the study of what is called the science of public administration, he started now giving a response to it. The response is, this entire mutually contradicting situation is emerging because whatever that you are seeing as the principle here as unit of command by Ludwig and Ludwig is failing to observe the entire practical situation. So what he says was, there is clear gulf in terms of principles and practice. This gulf between principles and practice is emerging because you have not made any research upon these particular aspects. There is no research. Number two, you are straight away jumping into what is called as principles of public administration without really looking at what might be the vocabulary which has to be developed first. What might be the vocabulary which has to be developed first in order to ensure that it is acceptable to many scholars such that they remain disciplined. They remain in tune with the discipline. Number three, all is made of what? Situations. Organizational situations have not been understood. This is what Herbert Simon has to convey. In organizational situations, given the complexity of the historical context, the focus upon structure of organization is less important than what he says as the processes within the organization. So he brings in this element of administrative processes. These administrative processes must be understood in terms of what? In terms of behavior. This is where he brings in this aspect of behavioralism into the study of public administration. What behavioralism says? Behavioralism says that human behavior can be subjected to scientific study. We know that there are many disciplines which have been swept by this idea of human behavior being subjected to scientific study. So he brings in this element of behavioralism by the application of what is called as social psychology. Such that it becomes or it remains a discipline of scientific study. And amongst these administrative processes, he says that any process you consider that involves what is called as activity of decision making. Activity of decision making. If I have to know that this is the time that I have to issue a command, what I am trying to do? I am trying to decide upon. So for him, the structure of organization is structure of decisions. For him, the structure of organization is the structure of decisions. So by bringing decision making as an aspect of behavioralism, where a decision is an outward expression. What is behavior? Behavior is an outward expression. I will come to know about any particular person's behavior only when they exhibit something in terms of an action or a deed or a particular state of being. Decision is one such outward expression, and every expression is out of a particular decision. So for him, organization is all about the structure of these decisions. This is where he brings in this entire aspect of behavioralism. And if you observe these principles of administration, what they were trying to do was, they were saying that as science of administration is possible analogous to the natural sciences, they were trying to prescribe. These principles, and they are applicable, as Gulick and Rubik said, in any association of humankind. So irrespective of whether it is public organization or private organization, whether it is a home or it is a state, for any human association they are applicable. But as they are defective in their understanding, in their reasoning, the aspect of prescription becomes redundant. So it has to be replaced by something scientific. Scientific but not prescriptive. This is where, by bringing in the aspect of decision making into the science of public administration, Herbert Simon was trying to ensure that the discipline now attains what is called as descriptive character. And they were saying that the possibility of pure science within the study of public administration is possible. Herbert Simon says that science of public administration is possible. However, you have to become interdisciplinary, you have to become fluid. You have to take the cues from various disciplines, such that you emerge as a scientific discipline. So in every sense, whatever the orthodoxy which was prevailing in this traditional approach, it was bombarded by his propositions, which were revolving around what is called as decision making as an administrative process. This is where one of the thinkers says that where Weber brought in the aspect of what is called as anatomy of public administration by focusing upon how the structure has to be. Simon has brought about what is called as physiology of public administration. Physiology of public administration by bringing into focus the administrative processes. So for the organizational theory, without administrative processes, it is deficient. At the same time, without having the structural understanding about the organization, studying administrative processes is deficient. This is where the focus of Herbert Simon on decision making as an administrative process is very, very important. He brings in this element of behavioralism by focusing upon administrative process of decision making as an activity. Now, what is a decision? We know that decision is a choice which has been made. Decision is a particular choice that you are making. When can you make a particular choice? You can make a particular choice only when you know about the possible alternatives. all possible alternatives. But the fundamental question is, why should I decide? I should decide because I am working in an environment of organization. Why should I decide if I work in an environment of organization? I am working in the organization because there are certain objectives which cannot be achieved alone. Hence, what I do, I will work in group. This group is what organization. However, when you have many such groups, these groups must cooperate. So, for Simon, organization is all about cooperative group effort to achieve the consciously derived public purpose. Objectives. It is for this group effort I must decide. If there is a group effort, what are those situations where I have to decide? This is where he brings in the administrative situations. There are two situations in which decision making as an administrative process would occur. One, there is a problem. And two, when there is an opportunity. When there is a problem, in order to resolve it, I have to decide. I have to decide based on number of alternatives which are available by choosing a particular choice. And when there is an opportunity, I have to embark upon that opportunity from the organizational point of view because it leads to organizational objectives achievement. It furthers its efficiency. It furthers the attainment of their goals. In both of these respects, hence, decision making becomes fundamental. This is what has been lacked by the earlier thinkers in terms of their principles of administration. So, by bringing in this element of organization in the form of a cooperative group effort, and if you recall the constitutional provisions on cooperative societies, it gives the various dimensions of this so-called cooperation which are written in the constitution. There is an element of voluntarism. Cooperation is not a binding one. Cooperation occurs only when you voluntarily decide that yes, I will cooperate, I will act in tune with what you are trying to do. So there is an element of voluntarism. And even when I exercise control, there has to be democratic control. Number three, it also demands their participation. As we know that it is an interpersonal aspect, their participation is unavoidable. And it must have its own financial aspect. So cooperation is a fundamental aspect of what is called as organization. Problems and opportunities remain unavoidable and hence decision making becomes unavoidable and hence decision making as a structure of the organization must be stated. So as we have seen, if I recall, the criticism was that the principles are prescriptive in character. He is making it a descriptive statement. Second, they remained orthodoxy. He broke apart those orthodoxy and he took cues from various developments from various other disciplines. 3. When they focused solely upon principles, we know that they remain redundant because there was no research which has been done, there was no proper vocabulary which has been developed to the acceptance of various scholars or many number of scholars, which he is doing. Number 4, where the entire premise of politics administration dichotomy focused upon what is called as act of getting things done, doing action. He says that action is important, but that is again a decision. So what must be the premise for making study of public administration a science? The premise for making study of public administration a science is the premise on which the decisions are being made. He brings in the elements of what is called as value premises and factual premises into the study of public administration. What are these value premises and factual premises? A value premises is the one which is a subject to preference. If this is the cooperative group effort, in this particular cooperative group effort, as there are a number of members who are trying to cooperate, they will have their own individual preferences. Similarly, there are organizational preferences. That means whatever those objectives that at the personal level or the organizational level that we have, which have to be now in tune with what is called as this principle of this so-called cooperation as an aspect of organization. All these become what is called as value premises. They are subject to preferences. They are not measurable. They are observable only when we express. What are the factual premises then? Factual premises are, as I was stating earlier, the things which have been stated, that might be a particular deed, particular action or particular state of things. They are both observable and measurable. They are both observable and measurable. He says that any particular decision which is particularly based upon the ones or premises which are facts, that is those which are observable and measurable, will lead to more so-called rational decision. What is rational here according to Herbert Simon? Rational is one such decision which is a preferred behavioral alternative that has been chosen amongst number of such preferred behavioral alternatives that they had. It is the most preferred behavioral alternative. You had number of behavioral alternatives. Those behavioral alternatives which are based upon what is called as values and facts. So for him, every decision is written with this value fact premises. This is where he tries to address this challenge which has emerged by the political scientists against politics administration dichotomy. He is trying to replace this politics administration dichotomy with value fact dichotomy. So whatever the challenge which has emerged against politics administration dichotomy by attacking the basic premise for such dichotomy, which is the definition that administration is all about getting things done, is being replaced with the premises which lead to certain decisions, and these decisions to certain actions, and these actions which get things done. So these premises make it scientific. So let me not call it politics administration dichotomy, let me call it value fact dichotomy, he says. And for any rational decision, that is to arrive at a particular preferred behavioral alternative, we have to ensure that that particular decision is based on factual premises. And at the same time, he doesn't remain ideal here, because he knew that every situation has both value and factual premises. You are not free from value premises at all, continuously there. So what I have to do? I have to ensure that as much as possible, the factual premises are more in my decision making process by choosing a preferred behavioral alternative such that I reach this stage of rational decision making. So he concludes that probably a rational decision is not possible, as has been pointed out by various thinkers on this decision-making model such as Lindblom and Zioni, who say that there is a rational decision-making which is possible. Simon debunks this idea of rational decision-making because it doesn't take into consideration all the situations in the form of value premises, and hence, and it also has the assumption that we have complete knowledge about a particular situation, which is wrong. It is wrong because, as he says, there are a number of influences, and these influences limit our ability. This is where he brings in psychology. Our cognitive ability is limited. Cognitive ability is limited because as we see progress towards more and more specialization, more and more technological innovation, our ability to learn many things is getting limited more and more. That means our knowledge about a particular situation is limited. Our cognition gets limited. Second, we also have our own beliefs, we have also our own values, our own preferences. We are also influenced by many other surroundings. As Dwight Waldo says, administration functions in a cultural complex. You are not free from these cultural aspects. So this is where he says that absolutely rational decisions are not possible in practice. So what Simon is also doing is, while building up theory of organization, theory of administration, simultaneously he was also trying to address the practical situations. So both are going together, theory and practice. If rational decision is not possible, and whenever, remember, if I have to apply the earlier traditional approach, the structural approach, the administrator is called as what? Economic man. That means use least resources, maximize the efficiency. Then only your organization is effective. And the man who does it is called as economic man. And the most ineffective organization, according to Simon, is the one which has what is called as social man, where he functions purely on the basis of values. Least number of factual judgments would be there in his decision making process. He is social man. Economic man is not possible, according to Simon. Social man is not good for the organization. This is where he brings in a middle path. He says that we have what is called as administrative man. we have what is called as administrative man. Who is this administrative man? Administrative man is the one who takes a decision which is called as, according to him, satisficing. That means he knows his limitations, and based upon that, he takes a decision which is satisfactory, and he makes a decision which is sufficient. Here we are choosing a preferred behavioral alternative which is minimum with value judgments, and we have more and more factual premises within this particular decision. With this aspect, Simon also tries to understand that in order to make this pure science of public administration possible, inclusion of these limitations is also very important. So administrative man knows that he has limitations in terms of knowledge, many other such limitations. Within those limitations, he is taking the decision. And more importantly, Simon also brings in one more particular element. Decision making doesn't occur in an instance. Decision making occurs in terms of stages. First stage, he calls it as intelligence activity, where you identify the problem or you identify the opportunity. Then comes the design activity, in which for that particular problem or for that particular opportunity, what are the behavioral alternatives that I have based upon these value facts premises. And lastly, it comes with what is called as choice activity, whereby I choose a particular preferred behavioral alternative which is as much as possible rational or satisfying. At the same time, he also cautions by saying that this particular delineation is not sharp. It is not sharp because the intelligence activity itself might have these three stages. Choice activity or design activity itself might have these three stages. So he brings in a particular kind of definiteness to this understanding of entire decision making as an administrative process. So from the organizational point of view, the objectives appear to be so-called values, and whatever the implementation part that we have in order to achieve these objectives remains to be factual in nature. And here also he cautions that there is no clear separation of value and facts here in this particular sense, because he says that every value judgment might have its own intermediate facts. For example, if you take into consideration the Indian Constitution, we say that liberty is a value judgment, justice is a value judgment. And if you read justice, it says that in the preamble, we have to achieve what is called as social, economic and political justice. For whom? For all. This is inserted into the preamble because we know that some sections of the population have been subjected to historical injustice. This is a fact. So every value judgment that we have might have their own intermediate facts. And as value judgment becomes a state of preference for that particular organization, which is trying to act in a cooperative manner, and as it is limited by what is called as preferences or knowledge or beliefs or faith, whatever you call, absolute rationality is not possible. Hence, what is possible is what is called as bounded rationality. It is on the basis of this bounded rationality we arrive at a particular decision maker within the organizational structure of the organization who is an administrative man. This is how he builds entire administrative theory on the basis of this decision making process by bringing in importance of social psychology into the administrative theory, and he tries to ensure that the state of public administration as a science still remains valid. And in the present context, Simon does have, as was pointing out at the introduction itself, his own relevance. Whenever government tries to implement any particular reform, it has certain challenges. For example, should I choose development administration as an alternative for a particular problem? Should I choose managerial administration, that is application of new public management as an alternative, or should I choose public service approach where you clearly put up what is called as open systems for resolving a particular problem as a problem? Should I choose this? So alternatives are preferred, their alternatives to be chosen even at a particular juncture is still relevant. At the same time, Herbert Simon is also relevant in the sense that we are grappling with a lot of uncertainty. The value judgments would come here. We are grappling with a lot of uncertainty. The entire decision making process as an administrative process, as part of administrative theory or administrative behavior, is to ensure that this uncertainty is addressed. This is where he brings in what is called as two types of decision making models: programmable decisions and non-programmed decisions or unprogrammed decisions. Programmed decisions are those which are routine, for which we have procedures established, for which we have a lot of experience. You go and get your birth certificate, you register on the COVID app to get vaccinated. All these are routine, hence they will be programmed. But there are certain situations which are uncertain. The pandemic clearly gave us this particular situation. I remember some of the collectors, with whatever the powers that they have got under the Epidemic Diseases Act and the Disaster Management Act, in order to grapple and to meet the challenges posed by this particular pandemic, according to certain thinkers of public administration, as we have in our universities, have exceeded their mandate. Because of which, there was a kind of behavioral output that we have seen from the medical representatives, which was contradictory the requirement in certain situations. So, pandemic gives us this uncertain situation. Here it is unprogrammed. Whenever there is an unprogrammed situation, we resort to a very well established model which is based on, again, decision making as an administrative process. That is, resorting to a standard operating procedure. They say that second wave is not yet over. Please observe these three mandatory standard operating instructions. Wear your mask, maintain physical distancing, and wash your hands frequently. The standard operating procedure. If you are traveling, you must carry your COVID negative certificate. You must say that I have been vaccinated. All these are standard processes. In order to meet this uncertainty as a challenge. Like this, by observing the significance of dynamics of situations and by bringing it to certain premises called value fact, based on which understanding the entire administrative processes, Simon tried to address these two twin challenges that we had. Challenges of criticizing politics administration dichotomy and discarding what is called as principles of administration. He replaced them with these new premises called value and facts and clearly stated that structure of organization is structure of decisions, whereby he tried to subdue the earlier understanding of either post-COP or POCC or whatever the principles, so-called principles which are being enunciated. And in this sense, both in the historical context and in the contemporary context, the contribution of Herbert Simon is tremendous. Thank you.